Alrighty, welcome to the Excitable Soul Podcast, everybody. Here we're interested in all things purpose. We want to know where and how people find meaning and connection in their lives. In every episode, we will be hearing the real life stories of how people have uncovered, understood, and unleashed their own unique sense of purpose. Our hope is that we can all learn from the journeys of our guests so that we can all better find a sense of purpose in our own lives. I'm host James Glover, performance coach and purpose nerd. I'm incredibly excited to be exploring these stories with you. So let's get going, shall we? Meet today's guest, Sammy Burt. Sammy is founder and co-founder of two organisational performance consultancies, Backpack and Farley. She is always looking to debunk unhelpful myths and demystify overcomplications. Sammy is a speaker on leaderfulness, development, purpose, and all things grown-upness, and is currently publishing her first book on this very subject. Sammy is mother of two brilliant lads, partner to her best friend, Sweary Jim, and a massive advocate of kitchen parties. She would also describe herself as being quite an all-right person to have around. In addition to all of this, Sammy is trustee of the UK's modern slavery charity and exploitation helpline, Unseen. I love this conversation. You'll probably be able to tell. I hope you love it too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Excitable Soul Podcast. I want you all to welcome Sammy. Sammy, thank you so much for coming to be on the podcast with us today. How are you feeling?
I was really good until about 5 seconds ago, and now I'm starting to feel nervous, which is crazy, right? But no, I'm really good, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that and appreciate the honesty. It's one of those things, isn't it? Like, we've just had a really wonderful conversation, and then all that's happened is I pressed a button and there's a red flashing light.
Yeah,
and both of us, that if the heart rate monitors were on, they'd be going.
Exactly that. So I'll just breathe through it. Be all good.
Well, we'll breathe and settle down, and then I'll ask you some really big and deep questions straight away.
Amazing. That's my happy place. Big and deep questions.
I guess where I'd like to start, really, Sammy, is you are a purpose practitioner. Like, you live in this kind of space. It's something that you are deeply connected to. And I guess before we kind of go into the journey around the experiences that have shaped who you are and kind of understanding what that means to you today, and maybe kind of looking into the future, I just wondered if you might just share with us, what is it about purpose that's kind of captures your attention or kind of brought you in, or is something that you want to bring to others?
I probably got a weird answer for that, I think.
Excellent.
I think purpose is everything and nothing at the same time.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's incredibly important if it's important to you.
Yeah.
I feel like people thrive with a sense of purpose. And I know people who have been hit over the head with, what's your purpose? And then it's just become this really heavy sort of thing that they're supposed to discover about themselves. And actually they've got other work to do, or they've got other things to think about. They've got other things to learn about themselves. So while I think having a sense of purpose is incredibly useful, I think we can become a little evangelical. Is that the right word? Evangelical about it.
Yeah.
And then it's too heavy. And actually, if you've got a sense of your purpose, there's a lightness to it. It's really uplifting. It's really, it moves you out of the conversations you shouldn't be in. It stops you saying yes to the things you shouldn't do. So there's a lightening of the load if you've got a sense of purpose. And my worry is sometimes that we sort of, we put it upon people and then they're heavied by it because they're not quite sure what it is. So I have this like funny relationship back and forth with it.
And such a beautiful way to articulate it. It's everything and nothing.
Yeah.
because purpose is paradoxical in nature, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's always about kind of holding tensions and seeing the both and. So the fact that actually your immediate reaction is, well, it's a paradox. It's everything and nothing in equal measure. And being able to articulate that tension in, if you do have a deep connection, the impact can be, but equally, there just might be some other stuff that you need to pay attention to in this moment. And that might not be the thing right now that brings lightness. In fact, actually feeling consumed or burdened by it can create the exact opposite experience, which is in no way useful at all.
And of course, I know people, and there's probably people throughout history who have lived every minute of their life against a purpose. But if you said to them, what's your purpose? The pressure of trying to articulate that would be too much. So I think I'm always mindful of talking to people about what really matters to them, about what stirs them, about what's important to them, about what in the world they stand for and what they stand against, as a way of getting into a conversation about purpose without really introducing the word purpose too early.
Yes.
Because it suddenly okay, we're doing that, right? I need to, so 5-word sentence, yeah, cool. Yeah. I need a 5-word sentence or whatever it might be. Actually, you know what? I don't have an issue if people can't articulate it in any way whatsoever.
Yes.
If they've got a really great sense of what it means for them.
God, I love this already. Like you are, I'm feeling lighter, and that's because I definitely have been evangelical about purpose for sure.
Oh, I have. Hands up.
And totally rigid in it being everything.
A purist purpose practitioner.
And had to just pay attention to the universe slapping me around a little bit to go, there's more to this, and you need to see it. And this idea of actually being able to let go of a purpose statement. I think the kind of the evangelical nature for me came in seeing the power of people being able to connect to that and be able to put words to the feeling. Yeah. And it was almost like the lightning rod. It was like the energy of this kind of force of nature hitting the lightning rod and being channeled. And you like just see people emerge with this almost kind of like an energy that hadn't been present before because they were able to connect to something more intentionally. But actually, that wasn't the power at all. It wasn't the words that became the lightning rod. It was the journey to trying to understand where the meaning in the words were. Yeah. And actually, sod the words. Who cares? Like the purpose statement is, useful and has its place, but it's secondary to the experience of finding meaning and meaningfulness. Like what really matters?
Yeah.
And what's the unique contribution that you're just trying to make to the things that you care about? And so you don't have to find this grand statement or this grand sense of purpose for your existence in the world. It's a much more organic, human, simple process of what do you really care about? Do you know? And have you challenged yourself to really own the things that matter versus the things you think should matter?
Yes, absolutely, beautifully said. Because I think the risk is as well with any kind of conversation around unearthing purpose, and we use the phrase unearthing purpose because the idea is that it's already in there, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of digging it up, but I think sometimes again the weight of that conversation can be that it's all already in there. Well, actually, there might just be like an edge of it, and then it's like an evolution. At that point, the only knowledge that you might have about your purpose is that it's vaguely in this territory, and actually I just need to go and play over there for a bit and see what further emerges from it. And I do think the purpose evolves and shifts. I don't see how it can't really. There might be a territory that it's in, and it might be a honing or an expanding or whatever. But it does shift. It's kind of this bit like a lava lamp. I feel like through your life, it's kind of like moving and going into different globules. And I don't know if that's a real word, but
it's definitely a word for me. I totally understand.
Globule. As it moves, and of course, then you have, so it can be quite flowy, and then you might have these big moments. You have a child, or you split up in a relationship, or you lose someone, or whatever it is, and suddenly it's a big jolt, and you go, oh, okay, something's changed here. Something else matters to me, or I didn't realize that matters to me, or everything's just changed. So there's these lovely sort of moments of flow, and then harsh cuts and changes and shifts. And I think so much of the work around purpose is just being in tune with what's going on in that space.
Yeah. Massively love it. Wow, what a place for us to start. I mean, before even kind of just exploring your own journey around purpose, just to kind of set that. And I think I'm enjoying kind of geeking out in this conversation a little bit with you, in that I just feel total alignment, and I have this image now of the kind of the orangey glow of the lava lamp, and I love the idea of these globules that are shifting and changing, and maybe there's a moment where two massive bits kind of converge, and because it has to be about evolution. Love that. Mind blown. Wonderful. Brilliant.
Morning.
Thank you. Let's focus in to you a little, and you use that language of unearthing. What's the journey of unearthing kind of meaning and purpose for you?
I'd love to have that like the big impressive story of like this thing happened, and I was racking my brains like, do I have one of those moments? And I realised actually, if you asked me this question yesterday, my answer would be different, and if you ask me tomorrow, it'll be different, because I think what I came to was that, do you know the phrase "death by 1,000 paper cuts"?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've sort of found my way through life and into purpose, and in holding my purpose in this kind of, this is so cheesy, right? But it's like purpose through 1,000 hugs. Like I feel like there's like just lots and lots of tiny little things that have just nudged me this way or nudged me that way or opened up this or opened up that, rather than there being like this sort of grand moment.
Yeah.
And so my journey, I think when I started to have conversations about purpose, it all felt really obvious, and not the language. The language was all really new to me, and I definitely tried to overthink it and create something that was, much more impressive than where I eventually got to. But I realized after sort of a lot of self-reflection and good conversations with people that actually what really matters to me about life is joy. Right? It's really simple. And I just think we have a certain amount of time on this planet. And that's my belief. And it should be as fun as possible for as many people as possible. So joy isn't at the cost of, your pain. Actually, it's a really connected system of increasing joy. And within that, there's some jagged edges, right? So I'm a trustee of a modern slavery charity. Now, you could say that is joyless, but actually it's a barrier to joy.
Yeah.
So my work there is, how do we remove some of the barriers to people having more joy in their lives? And then the majority of the work that I do around organisations or leadership development with people, so much of that is about raising awareness. Because I feel like if you've got a better understanding of yourself and the systems you're in, you'll notice that you've got more choices than you thought you did.
Yeah.
And then you can choose joy more often. And then that's infectious, right?
For
as
sure.
well, being around joyful people. And I realized that I think I kind of caught that from my mum and dad. I think we're a fairly simple family, if you like, and having simple fun was that was really important to us. Whatever that might be. My dad won't go through a checkout at a supermarket without making like such a dad joke to whoever's like packing. You can't move around in the world without these sort of interruptions of dad jokes or whatever it might be. And my mum, I think, like when we used to try and tidy up as kids, and we mock her for it now, but the thing that she would always say is, let's make a game of it. That was like her phrase, let's make a game of it. And so it felt like they were always looking for opportunities just to have a little bit more fun.
Yeah. So there are two things that are immediately I'm curious about. So one is the kind of the outcome and the significance of joy and the framing of that for you now, and how you access it, and especially in the roles that you're playing in your life, like as a trustee in a modern slavery for a modern slavery organisation. But the death by 1,000 cuts flipped to life by 1,000 hugs. Like so like love that, and I want you just to kind of stay in that space for a little bit, if you don't mind, and the reason for that, I think, Sammy, is, we were where we just started. The difference between when people feel a sense of lightness because they're connected to purpose versus feeling the burden and the anxiety of not knowing. It often, I certainly hear it from people. It feels like if I don't have something that is grand and earth-shattering, it is not enough. And actually, what you're describing there is, it's and I think you used the word there. It's about simplicity and
it's incremental.
Love that. And so I'm wondering if there's a playfulness that comes from dad jokes and tidying games like Mary Poppins at home. What are the other experiences that you feel have kind of aggregated up in that way?
I mean, I'm very competitive. So that comes in a lot. I think, how else have we brought fun and joy in? I think I just look for it everywhere. I mean, my partner calls me a happy idiot because I generally will walk into like quite a stressful situation or something, and I'll be like, "Hey, here's the silver lining," and it's not. I think he thinks it's kind of, well, he obviously knows it's not, but that it's a bit put on, and it's not. I just tend to go, oh wow, well that's the thing that happened, so that means oh my goodness, our car's just blown up, so we can get a new one. I look for the next, the good thing in it. We were talking just before we started recording about a client receiving an email from someone internally that was quite heavy and weighty, and my immediate reaction to that is, isn't that amazing that they can speak, that they can share their concerns with you? Whereas I think a lot of people that I come into contact with would read the content of an email. So I might be talking in circles a little bit, but read the content of a negative email and focus on the negativity in the email as opposed to what it took for the individual to be able to share that with someone.
Yeah.
So I think I have a bias towards positivity is fairly inbuilt.
Yeah.
And going back to kind of my mum and dad, I think there's an indestructibility that I've inherited, I think, from my mum, in that, and I say it about 10 times a day, like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not, I don't mean that in a flippant way. It's a genuine belief. Like, most things in our lives really aren't going to have that terrible an impact if we try them. So we may as well try them. And I think I definitely inherited that sense of nothing's going to knock me over really badly from my mum, who was just always out trying things, and kind of parked her ego and would just be out. I mean, she was starting businesses every other week, like with a postcard in the post office window. Now she's starting a business where you can pay 50p a day and she'll go and move your car around on your driveway while you're on holiday to fool the burglars, or turning your lights on and off, or they were way ahead of their time. They were renting baby equipment in the 80s. So you have to buy, and none of these things like turned into big businesses. But I think she and they really instilled in me a sense of what's the worst that can happen. We might have a bit of fun doing this, and if it doesn't go anywhere, it doesn't really matter. It wasn't anywhere a minute ago. So I think what that's allowed me to do in this life by 1,000 hugs, I go toward things. I go toward everything, because I don't feel like the risk is very often that high. If I go towards someone and introduce myself and they turn around and walk away from me, well, okay, cool. They're lost. I'm awesome. They should have got to know me, right? I don't mean that quite how that sounds, but I just...
Well, you should, because it sounds awesome.
But I genuinely just think going towards things is better than going away from them. So that's what's given me the confidence to try stuff. My career has been really winding because it's been led by the next shiny thing that I feel like I'm interested in. And then it's led to this thing that's massive and I love it. But I dropped out of college. I didn't go to university. I really wanted to follow what was emerging in front of me. and just keep taking risks.
So there's something like the train of thought here. The first train of thought for me was, I can immediately resonate to the influence of mums on
Yes. Oh yeah, I listened
on
to yours and your
on
sisters.
deep optimism, and and kind of possibility. And
Mm.
I think it played out differently in different experiences, but the kind of the outcome was the same, which is I'm forever, speak to my bosses. They're forever and all have always been. Can we have some pragmatic reality to go with that optimism, please? um, and I think I've learned the muscle of being able to bring a bit of that in. But if I'm honest with you, the older I get, the more I'm rejecting it, because I'm like, that's okay. You got a shitload of people that are all about the pragmatic reality. If you want some of that, go speak to them. If you want unbridled optimism about what may be possible, whether or not my feet are firmly on the ground or not, hello, I'm your guy. That's the conversation I'm in for. But this idea of seeing a role model that was willing to find the good in situations, and I'm genuinely sat here thinking about all these moments in my life where I'd bring something to my mum, who is the first person that I always looked to for kind of reassurance, and her being able to find either the positive or the opportunity in any situation immediately flicks your perspective, doesn't it? We're not browbeaten. We're not the victim. We're not succumbing. It's a magical type of resilience, because it's not, I've got to persevere with this difficulty. It's like, what freaking difficulty? We're going for that thing over there. How cool's that? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And you get through the hardship anyway. And you kind of, it's on reflection, you're like, wow, that was actually really tough. But hey, look, here we are. Let's go again.
That's it. I mean, I love it at the moment, because I'll go back to my folks and talk about work, because it's like my favourite thing. And my mum will sit there and nod, and then she says to me, I've got no idea what you're talking about, but I love hearing it. And so she's not, like, almost at the opposite to the rest of the world. She's not worried about the content of what it is that I'm saying. She's just enjoying how much joy I'm getting from it, and how fulfilled I appear to be from it. And I think that's something also that's quite infectious. I like, when people say, like, what's your favorite kind of music or whatever, and I've been that guy that's always like, oh, I've got really eclectic tastes, and which is such a non-answer. And I've realized actually it's a real answer, because actually I love any kind of music where I'm around other people that love it. So I would never get in my car and put on house music, right? That's sitting on my own. That's not what I'm going to do. But I went to Berlin for 3 days with some DJ mates for someone's 30th, and we were in house clubs the whole time, and I loved it. And none of that is about the music, right? I'm just around people who are bouncing off the walls for a lot of different reasons, but mostly the music, and they are so tuned into what's good about it and what they love about it and what's happening for them, that I'm just infected by that. And that, like, the flip of that, my first ever gig was Slipknot, right? And again, I'm never going to get in the car and listen to Slipknot on my own, but I remember this kind of energy that I was absorbing from the people around me who were so obsessed by it. And so I think what I feel like I'm been very lucky with is being able to be infected by other people's joy. It doesn't matter what it is. I can sit and listen to someone who is obsessed with, engineering the tiniest little drill bit for a dental drill. This is a specific thing. But their obsession with why the micrometer of that is so important becomes important to me. And I feel very lucky to be able to do that, because I rarely have to look for what's important to me, because I can absorb what's important to other people.
And so, I think again, it's a beautiful paradox, right? In that actually the thing that is meaningful to you is seeing the meaning in what's meaningful to other people. So to your mum's point, it doesn't matter about the context and the content. It's how do you feel about it? Because that's then how I feel about it, and finding that connection. And interestingly, before we started to record, we were talking about the opposite as well. So you just use that word to be infected with other people's joy.
Yes.
There is also the kind of like the antibiotic
Yes.
or the white blood cell, the immune response, right? The immune response required to the opposite, which is when people aren't bringing joy or don't see joy, or because there are abundance of people out there who aren't seeing the world through that same lens, and so to not be infected by that, but to be able to create the right kind of immune response to still be able to make a connection is then a whole different other experience, right?
It is, and I think my antibiotic or my antidote for that is compassion. And I'm really mindful that I might be making myself sound like this perfect person. I have no qualms about, that I'm full of failings, and I have a few things that I focus on, and I do feel like compassion is something that is my antihistamine to that allergic reaction. Actually, if I'm sat in front of someone who is desperately negative or aggressive, or whatever's going on for them, I tend to look for my own compassion toward that person. If someone's attacking me, my defense mechanism is to wonder what's going on for them, that they feel they need to speak to me like that, or they need to behave toward me like that. And that's an internal defense mechanism. And sometimes then I'll use that as my weapon too, and go toward them, hold on, what's going on for you that you feel you need to speak to me like this? That's actually incredibly powerful. To come towards someone with compassion when they're not expecting it is very unsettling for them. And sometimes, they bat you away, but more often than not, it stops them in their tracks, and they wonder, first of all, why you give a shit. And then they wonder why they are being the way that they are. So I find compassion to be a much more useful shield and weapon than matching them in aggression or negativity or anything like that. It doesn't feel like a useful way to spend time.
And it's interesting, this again, the kind of the concept of going towards kind of emerges here as almost like a kind of thread of meaningfulness. And my feeling here, I'm sat here going, wow, like I really am on a journey continually to try and understand my reaction in any given circumstances, and just try and do better sometimes next time, because sometimes I get it right and sometimes I don't.
As we all are, right?
But I definitely don't immediately reach for compassion when I probably should. Like it takes me a bit of time to kind of get to compassion from an immediate place of I guess two things. One, that are both threat responses, both defensive responses of how are they right and I'm wrong in this situation.
Okay, so you self-doubt.
First one. Ooh, like I may have pressed the wrong button there. What did I do wrong in that situation? Maybe totally nothing. And the other one being, how dare you? And it tends to be a mixture of those two things immediately for me that kind of comes out. I'm like, oh, all right. With a healthy mix of being playful in the moment to try and minimize the level of negative energy being experienced. So there's this total cauldron of internal experience. And actually, the way that you just described it there, in terms of going, well, actually, what compassion does immediately is it makes me put myself in their shoes and ask what's going on. And at the same time, probably enables me to engage with them in a way that immediately puts the agenda back on them thinking about why they've shown up in this way. I'm like, that's the 1-2, but that's like the Muhammad Ali of like reaction to any kind of threat. Like it's, you've Mike Tyson'd that individual so I guess I'm just sharing openly the reaction to that, and my curiosity, my interest is like, how do you do that?
Well, so I do want to just share a shadow side to that, I guess, because I think that's really important. And back to polarities and tensions, right?
Yeah.
So, so I've been seeing a therapist for the last couple of years in order to understand myself better for this work.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's loads of other stuff that I should have known about myself. But this weapon of compassion that I've been very proud of doesn't always serve me quite so well.
Yeah.
So the shadow side of this is, so the brilliant thing is, right, I'm driving along the road, someone cuts me up. Now I've got I could carry 3 hours of annoyance and frustration that someone's cut me up on the road. Or in that moment, I could go, oh my goodness, I hope wherever it is they're going, they need to get to quickly isn't a bad place. You know, I hope they're not heading to the hospital to visit someone on the deathbed. And then it's gone. I'm done. Right. I don't need to carry any anger towards them any longer. It's lifted from me. I've reached out to them emotionally and I'm done with that situation. That's a really positive version of that. The shadow side is someone genuinely is awful towards me and I don't allow myself to feel angry or feel sorry for myself.
Yeah.
So that's the shadow there that I'm consciously working on at the moment, is occasionally I'm allowed to feel for me.
Yeah.
Because my compassion goes out to defend myself, I don't keep very much for myself. And therefore, you know, in some way I'm probably bottling some stuff up.
Yeah.
So there's a real watch out. There's a real watch out in doing that. But I still maintain, my therapist might feel differently, I still maintain that 99% of the time it's incredibly useful.
Yeah.
And for both parties. I think there's a number of things I suppose I believe about the world, and I want people to feel, even for a split second, like someone gives a shit about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you come towards me with real anger and aggression and frustration, I want you to know that I've put the content of that to one side and I don't want you to feel like that anymore. Yeah. That's what's important here, is you no longer feel that anger, not solving the problem that you think you're coming to me with.
Yes.
It's so and how you do it, I don't know. I think you practice, right? It's like any muscle. You just try and notice the moments when you go inward. So you're thinking, your first step is your mind has all gone inward, right? What have I done to upset you, and how dare you speak to me like that? So you've gone inward. I think it's really useful to notice, like, what's the language in your mind? So if you hear yourself thinking, what have I done? Then that might be the moment that you go, oh, I've heard that phrase.
Yeah. I'm
going to purposely go out now and wonder, this probably isn't about me in the slightest.
Yeah.
How are you in this?
Yes.
So I think there's some real, you know, like deliberate practice that you can do around trying to be more compassionate, and start with the easy stuff, right? Don't try and start with some massive forgiving someone you fell out with 25 years ago stuff, you know, or maybe do. But I think practicing on the little things, and noticing when what's bubbling up for you isn't really the thing that's bubbling up for you.
Yeah, and a previous guest on the podcast shared something which for me, in exactly the same way that you're describing here, just became really quite profound. And he just said, in those moments, the question I ask myself is the choice I'm making taking me closer to the man that I want to be or not?
Oh, I love that.
I kind of just sat back and went, that's the question, isn't it? That's what, well, I say, that's the question, isn't it? That is the question for me, because I have a clear idea of who I want to be in the world and how I want to be. For me to ask myself that question is the best way to get me to create that momentary pause of reflection and influence the choice that I'm making, because it immediately made me go, well, in this situation, am I making it about me, or am I seeing what actually needs to be seen? Can I just ask a different question, which is, how am I going to feel about this in 20 minutes?
How am
I going to feel about this in 6-12 months time? So what choice do you want to make that's going to take you closer to the man that you want to be?
I love that. And I love that there could be then, from the back of this conversation, the second question we're focusing very much on, if there was a negative person in front of us, but of course this is the world around us. But if there was a second question, so is the choice I'm about to make going to take me closer to the man that I want to be? And is the actions that I'm seeing in the person in front of me who they really are and who they want to be?
Yeah, nice.
Because I think that then opens up that same question to say, well, I doubt it. Most people don't want to be an arsehole. So how can I support this person not to be an arsehole in this moment? Yeah. It's really simple. This is back to the word joy, right? I love that it's only 3 letters. I love the simplicity when you really distill and boil stuff down. I don't want to be a dick. You probably don't want to be a dick. Should we talk about why this is feeling like a dickish conversation or whatever? Sorry, my language is not great. But I think getting into the simplicity of it is makes it so much more accessible, because we could theorize and navel gaze and talk about all of the the different layers of all this stuff, and sometimes I think it's really useful to just have that question, as you said, does this take me closer to the man I want to be? Is the person in front of me being at their best right now, or being who they want to be?
And again, if we just kind of put ourselves in the shoes of those that are listening and kind of just underline the simplicity, there feels to me like there are 3 things that we're saying. The first thing here is that the whole connection to sense of purpose can be a kind of an anchor around all of these things. Like, what is truly meaningful to you in any given moment? So when you find yourself reacting, do you have something that you can hold on to? When the tornado is whooping round, what are you clinging to? Then there's a couple of other pieces here, which is you building a level of awareness to your reaction in the moment is really important. And that doesn't have to be with any level of judgment. Just understand what the reaction that you're having in the moment is, and notice that there is good and not so good in any of those reactions. And that is okay. No beating with sticks here.
No.
And the third element being, what's the one question that you want to hold on to that enables you to make choice, make decision, or just simply see more options than you would have done before?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for summarising that, because I felt like I was waffling a little bit there, but it sounds like it was quite clever when you say it back.
Well, I mean, it's freaking genius. And I love that the language is colourful. If Brené Brown can swear all the time, totally. She's led the way, and it's okay. Millions of people listen to her podcast, and she swears like a trooper. So
I often drop an F-bomb in quite early in workshops, just to make everyone realise I'm not a teacher. So when I'm sort of stood there in front of 10 or 20 grown-ups,
taking the register,
and I can see that they're all sort of wondering, how teachery this is going to be. I do think that dropping an F-bomb quite quickly is useful. Everyone sort of goes, "Oh, thank goodness."
So, Sammy, the kind of the structure, the process that we try to bring to this podcast is a kind of an exploration of the moments that have shaped you and brought meaning, and then moving into the kind of the present day and the sense making, and then the kind of the third element is almost like looking forwards into the future. And I feel like just really organically moved through the first 2 almost totally accidentally, but really beautifully. And I'm interested now in how purpose is shaping the future for you. What are the things that you are really excited about right now that are being informed by your sense of purpose and you're hopefully kind of willing into existence? Or where are the leap of faiths where there are just some big open gaps and kind of total terror that you're moving towards because purpose is guiding
you? Love that question. I think, what do I think? What do I feel? I for a long time I thought that my value was around being a translator. I noticed that I was often in conversations where I was helping people understand something, and I don't mean that in a patronising way, but more that I think through my upbringing, I I understand a wide variety of people. I went to different types of schools. I spent some time in a massive comp. I went to a small private school. I've moved around a lot, a bit like my music tastes. And so I feel like a skill of mine is to be able to help people access stuff and without dumbing it down. And so at the moment, that is sort of manifesting against this purpose of mine around joy, increasing access to joy, if you like, getting more joy in the world, is to busting some really unhelpful myths, or redefining words that we throw around. So it drives me absolutely mad that I saw this thing the other day. So in Scots, the Scots language, there is something like 450 different words for snow, right? Because it's that important historically to agriculture and to life that we need to be able to describe very specific things about snow.
Yeah.
And then we have this word professional that means nothing and is used 20 times a day as a stick to beat people with, be professional. I've seen it as a value named in organizations, professionalism. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
I mean, when you really get down to it, it just means getting paid, right? So why do we then ask it of people, be professional? And I feel similar around leadership. So I've just started to sort of redefine leadership. Actually, let's talk about being leaderful. In the same way that we think about being, you are delightful. I can't put my finger on it, what it is about you, but you are delightful, beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's a complex mix of qualities and elements and experiences that create someone who when we're near them, we believe them to be a leader, as opposed to this suit that we put on, which is leadership or fellowship or whatever. It's a thing. So I'm trying to invite people to question and to find their own definitions of some of these things. And my most recent one, can I do a plug?
Yeah, please.
So I'm writing a book, and it's trying to define what it is to be a grown-up, because I realise that so many people are just walking around pretending to be their stereotype or character of what it is to be a grown-up, because we're all told that we should be, you're going to grow up, or be a grown-up, grow up. It's weaponized in the way that it's used. And as I started sort of talking to people about it and realizing that more and more people would just they would confess to me kind of through gritted teeth or like whispers, no, I don't feel like a grown-up either. And this would be people in their 40s, people in their 80s. Everyone was telling me how they didn't really feel like one. And it really made me wonder, so what is one? And then I set off on this piece of research to try and really understand what it is to be a grown-up. And what's beautiful about where I've got to and what's emerged, not in terms of I haven't done it, what's emerged in all of the research that's come out, is that really at the crux of it, when we're around someone we would feel like is a grown-up, they are curious, they are compassionate, they have faith in themselves and other people around them, they're in connection with themselves, they're in connection with the world around them, at a micro level and a macro level. Is that the right way around? Anyway, and what's amazing about that, right, is then I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. They have those same qualities. My 2-year-old is incredibly curious and compassionate. If he hits his brother over the head, he wants to give him a hug after. And
he hits him so he can give him a hug.
Exactly. He's curious. Will this hurt?
Yeah.
But compassion and curiosity and confidence in yourself and a desire to be in relationship with others is something we see small children do really easily. And then for whatever reason, we've trained ourselves out of it.
Yeah.
And we've trained ourselves that actually being a grown-up is to always have the answers, and to not really show our feelings. I mean, maybe this is just British grown-ups, but there's a mask that we should put on if we are to be a grown-up.
Yeah.
And so what's lovely about where I've got to with this is it's an unearthing again.
Yeah.
Nothing in the result of my research says that anyone needs to learn anything new. We just need to unlearn some stuff.
Yes.
And step toward people. And I suppose I genuinely have a belief that if everyone was just a tiny little bit more curious or a tiny little bit more compassionate, we could make some really massive shifts.
Yeah.
And so all of that is driven by my desire for joy, because I think people would be happier if they were wearing less of a mask or taking it off a little bit more often. So it feels so simplistic, because we've gone from simple into complex and back to simple, and we can stay there, and we can just sort of play around in that space. And I really genuinely hope, like, when I'm on the tube, this is so sad. I was on the Elizabeth line yesterday, and someone was reading a book, and I was like, like maybe one day I'm going to get on the tube and someone's going to be reading my book, and I'm going to see them exhale. I'm going to see a moment where someone feels released from this weird tether to what it is we think we should be in the world, and realize that they can actually just be themselves, and that's awesome.
So, right, we've got two things that we've got to get into here immediately. Like, I want to stay with that. So I want to come back to that, which is your experiences around writing the book. So there's something about that. But I also want to talk about where you started there, which was about the content and the curiosity and the journey of writing the book. Because as you were talking there about this concept of being a grown-up, what felt, I felt that, when you were kind of going simple, complex, simple, I felt this kind of, there's an emotional connection. Then there's this over-intellectualization.
Yes, yeah.
And then there's this emotional connection.
Yeah.
And it's almost there's almost a just coming back to the real data, come back to the real information that you need to pay attention to, because this idea of observing somebody that you think is grown up, in the way that you're describing it, obviously, because I don't know the kind of the research, but just what I'm hearing from you is this: there's a feeling that is generated. This person is connected. This person is confident. Like, we're feeling a whole bunch of things because of what we're witnessing. Yeah,
that's exactly. Often it. I feel safe around this person. They are a grown up.
Well, yeah, and then so remove all that, because we over-intellectualize what a grown-up is supposed to be, and to your point, it's been weaponized. Would you just grow up?
Yes.
And stop behaving like such a child.
Yes.
Which is basically just an adult not owning their own shit and being annoyed by a whole bunch of other things and trying to control the behavior of another human being in a way that's probably not justified in that particular moment. That might be an overgeneralization, but often we see corrective behaviors come from parents to children just purely because they're frustrated, irritated, not by the child themselves, but just the lack of accountability and ownership over the way they're showing up in any given moment being expressed.
Well, and copy and paste everything you just said, but remove actual parent and child and go into an organisation where you have parent-child relationships, and exactly the same thing is being demanded of people. Grow up, be professional.
Yes.
Same weapon.
Don't bring me problems. Don't make too much noise. Just get on.
This idea of there's a whole nother podcast in why I'm angry about come to me with solutions, but we'll do that another day.
Well, you can 100% come back, but there's this sense of the kind of the organic nature of emotional connection to an over-intellectualization, to then letting go of, unlearning the over-intellectualization and coming back into the kind of the emotional connection, which just felt really wonderful. And I'm people who listen will know that I'm a total fanboy of Lisa Feldman Barrett and her research around the theory of constructed emotion.
Yes.
And to the point that you're making, like, language is critical, because language is part of the way in which we make sense of the emotions that we have and we're experiencing. And the evidence tells us that most adults use 6 to 8 words to describe their entire emotional experience.
Yeah.
It's like watching a black and white TV when you could have high def, Dolby surround sound, and without being able to challenge some of these constructs, or not challenge them, create a greater level of granularity around what is actually happening.
Yeah.
You're never in the real experience.
No, absolutely. And so I think I do 2 things to try and combat that. One is I invent new words accidentally a lot of the time. So leaderful is sort of me trying to go, I need something here that's uncomfortable enough that people lean in and pay attention. So that's working quite well. Often I talk about developing rather than development. Now, obviously, developing is a word, but so often we talk about development like it's a thing to do, and actually the ing says this is continuous, right? And well, one of my dad's favourites was swallowable. So you have soluble tablets. So I just assumed when I was a kid that the ones that you swallow were swallowable. And I think I just moved through like well, even before we started recording, I was talking about something being contagion, and you're like infected. Yeah, that's the right word. But I think what's beautiful about language is that you can play with it, right? You don't have to be strict to it. So the more you know of it, the better you can articulate your feelings, the better you can notice your feelings, and then you might articulate them. So, there must be 400 different words for happy, surely, if there's 400 words for snow. So why do we use happy?
And kids, again, are brilliant at that if you give them space to. Right? My daughter did a dance performance last year, and the school that she goes to is wonderful. It's adults who want to dance right the way through to toddlers who want to dance, and everybody performs in the show, right? Everybody, there's like multiple different dances, everybody has their opportunity, and it's in a big theatre, so it's a small dance company, big theatre, and everybody, or like all the family members come. It's wonderful, real wonderful experience. And it was also the latest like she's ever been up. When I was going to pick her up at the end, it's like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I'm driving her home.
Midnight feasts.
And I remember I was driving her down the evening or the afternoon before the first appointment, and I said, "So how are you feeling?" And she went, "I'm scappy, Daddy." I went, "Ooh, what's that?" And she went, "Well, I'm scared and I'm happy, so I'm scappy."
I love that.
Wow, yeah, like how perfect is that to describe the actual experience? She wasn't experiencing one thing; she was experiencing multiple things, and she just went, "How do I put all that together? It's this." And I was like, I totally understand now. She's probably describing some sense of anticipation, might be a different word, but actually hers is way better. It gets to the point.
I love that. The one that my son came out with was, I think he stole it vaguely off Bluey, but he kind of reworked it, which was difficult, which is when something is terrific and difficult. And I was like, I love that. And I think this is it. This is another thing about growing up, right? We're not supposed to play with these things anymore. That's a childlike thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, why not? If I need a new way to describe the way that I'm feeling right now, why should I be limited by the words that I know?
Yeah.
I've got choices there. I could go to the Emotional Thesaurus, which is an amazing book, or I could just make something up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I guess there's another podcast in this for us around why people don't pay attention to emotion and they dismiss it.
Yes,
which is like you want to get me on my high horse, then that is the first place to go. But let's just pivot back to the kind of the experience of writing the book and what that's bringing out to you, because that feels like leap of faith territory. That feels like kind of purpose in action. It kind of taking you to a place. So, what are some of the feels that you've been feeling in the process of trying to kind of bring this book to life? And talk to me, this idea of being on the tube and seeing somebody exhale because they feel lighter was just a really wonderful expression of your kind of hope for
that's the vision of the book, is that one person, obviously hopes loads of people, but I'd be really
millions and millions and millions and millions. or the nine people that listen to this podcast.
Yes, if all 9 of you could buy it, that'd be great. But that is the vision of the book, is that someone feels released, someone feels untethered, something's been untied from around them in reading it. So that is the vision, absolutely. How it started, very arrogantly, I thought I was writing a book that I already had the answer to.
Yeah.
So the working title, and probably the published title, is What's a Grown Up Anyway? And when I started writing it, I thought the answer was, there's no such thing. It's a mythical creature. And I'm going to write a book that proves that there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And so I did that thing very open-mindedly of going out to find the research that supported the hypothesis. And then had a bit of a moment where I was like, well, and another thing happened, actually. Despite the fact that when I'm at my best, I'm around other people, and the best work I do is in conversation with other people and all the rest of it, I decided to write a book. And so I went into a room, closed the door, and sat on my own. And forgot everything I knew about myself, which is, I need to do this with people, because that's what gets me fired up. That's what fuels me. So there were 2 big learnings probably in the first year, I think. One, that I was being quite close-minded about it, or fixed-minded, and the other that I was trying to do it on my own. So I then started working with a book coach, a writing coach, who was just fantastic at helping me. Well, and also the third battle I was playing was with imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You know, how dare I think I've got a book in me? And so at first I thought I was writing a book that was basically a compilation of everybody else's research.
Yeah.
And I sat with the writing coach on the first day, and I was talking through the whole thing. And then I said, and then at the end, I might just sort of, say what I think about it. And she was like, and what is that? And I talked her through it, and she said, so that's your philosophy? And I was like, oh no, I don't have a philosophy.
Really?
Don't be ridiculous. Yeah. And she was laughing. She was like, I think you do. And I was like, no. I've got an idea. I've got some thoughts. And she was like, yeah, look up philosophy. And so I think I had to remind myself that I wasn't trying to write a book that needed to be factually correct. And I don't mean that I'm fast and easy with the facts, but that I didn't need to write a book that would meet everybody's needs, and that could be, I could write a book because it's mine about the way that I see the world. Yes. And that's perfectly valid too. But that took me a good 18 months to realize that I was allowed to have an opinion on this subject, and that actually it shouldn't be a book of me compiling Lisa Feldman Barrett alongside, can't think of another single thinker, Brené Brown, and even Maslow or whatever. I thought at the beginning that really this was like a curation job, and that my voice in it wasn't valid, and I wondered why it was so hard to write, and then I started writing my stories and my experience, and the whole thing isn't memoir. There's lots of stories from other people, but I realized actually that's what's really important to me as well, is storytelling. Why am I trying to create an emotional connection with someone through a fact? Like, I know that's not how that works. But if I want to talk to you about biology, telling you, there's a story in the book that I love, which is it was last year. I was on holiday in France, and I was in a games room. The kids were like playing, and there was a load of teenagers in there, and I watched these couple of very young teenagers like desperately not looking at each other. This boy and this girl who were clearly fancied each other, but they were desperately not looking at each other, and not, you could see it happening. And I was like, that's a story about why biology isn't the answer to what a grown-up is, because they could probably procreate. I mean, should they? No, no way. They shouldn't go and do that. So that, so I think finding my way into stories that explain the facts felt like a big liberation. It's like, okay, I'm in this now. I get this now.
there's also safety in the facts, right? If you're
Oh
doing
yeah, it's
you're doing a
indisputable.
creation job, then the responsibility is the representation of other people's work, whereas and you don't have to rely on credibility there because it's in the stuff that you're sharing.
Yeah,
Whereas
as long as I do the right citation, I'm
exactly,
clean.
whereas actually what you're talking about is vulnerability. You're talking about being truly courageous and speaking your truth, and
and I'm
what
going to
that
have to be ready
requires.
for people to say, well, I don't agree.
Yeah,
And that's going to be cool too.
yeah,
There was a moment, so you had Sean Gomes on, didn't you,
yeah,
a little while ago, and that's how we met. Was
yeah.
he said, you two excitable people need to talk to each other. Could you go over there and talk to each other, please?
Yeah.
But I bought his book. And I read about 3 pages, and then I was like, I can't read anymore. Right? I've got 2 small kids, so I was really frustrated. I kept trying to go back to it and read it, and I ended up listening to it on audiobook, and it was brilliant. But I got about halfway through, and I had to turn it off because I started to panic that I was trying to write the same book, and I was like, oh, if I listen to any more, I'm just going to plagiarize this. And then I sat with my book coach, and I told her, and she was like, okay, you might be writing about the same thing, but you're definitely not writing the same book.
Yeah.
So the purpose of this might be shared in that it sounds like his, but this is her saying to me, like, it sounds like his book is about increasing people's awareness of how they work, and in order that they might make different choices.
Yeah.
And mine is the same.
Yeah.
And interestingly, there's loads of similar data points behind it, but it's not the same book and it's not the same audience.
No.
So that was another little where my imposter syndrome kind of crept up again to go, oh, someone's already written this book. And she said, how many books do you think there are written about Shakespeare?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. And she goes, how many books do you think there are written about Shakespeare and love? And I was like, oh yeah. So there's been quite a few moments, I think, where I've had to remind myself that it's okay that I have a perspective.
Yes.
And that might be useful to someone.
Yeah.
And kind of go back to basics with it.
And there's something really wonderful here about perspective and finding it, and then finding it again,
Oh,
and then
and
losing
again and
it,
again and again and
finding
again.
it, and part of just the kind of human experience is always wrestling with perspective, because ultimately we're just trying to make sense of the data that's getting into the black box, which is our brain inside of our skull, and dependent on how we're taking that information in any particular moment. To your point, I might talk about purpose differently tomorrow than I did today, and I probably mentioned it differently yesterday than I am doing right now. The need to sometimes be able to source external perspective and how quickly that can help us reconnect and realign to actually what matters to us is I think is much about the significance of purpose as understanding self. You know, the William Damon's definition of purpose around something that has meaningfulness to the self and consequence to the world beyond the self, I love, because of the fact it brings depth to our personal understanding, but it also acknowledges the interconnection of us with other people.
Yes.
And that's constant. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And the dynamic nature of that interaction actually dictates the level of success. So we can call it
it's
purpose.
Impossible not to be. You know, I'm challenged by this all the time, that we can go and do leadership development with an individual on their own. You can't go into a white room and come out developed. You know, we are in connection, exactly as you've said, with the people around us, with the world around us, with our history, with our future. Like, you know, a monk meditating on a mountain is still sat on grass.
Yeah.
And it still has their own reason for being there. So staying connected is just so important, isn't it? Because we are anyway. Like, we can't not be. So we may as well be conscious of the connections we're making and what we're putting into them and what we're taking away from them.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. That's the perfect place, I think, to kind of press the pause button. I love it. We started with purpose is everything and nothing, and we finished with, why not just acknowledge the connection, because it exists anyway, and the impact that can have. Sammy, just wonderful to have this conversation with you. Like, honestly, we could geek out probably for the rest of the morning and into tomorrow, and nobody else needs that in their lives apart from maybe us. So, thank you very much for being with us. Wonderful conversation.
Thank you. I really enjoyed that. Just meandering through it together. It's lovely.
Yeah, brilliant. Alrighty. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Massive thank you for taking the time to listen to the Excitable Soul podcast. If you are interested in uncovering, understanding, and unleashing your sense of purpose, come and explore our purpose immersion programs at theexcitablesoul.com. We look forward to hearing from you there or being with you on our next episode. Have an incredible day.